Hi everyone, welcome to the Agent Effect podcast. I'm your host, Paul Jarrett, and today I have the pleasure of being with Krishna Gade, the founder and CEO of Fiddler AI, a leading force in AI observability, bringing trust, transparency, and accountability to enterprise AI systems. With past engineering leadership at Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, and Microsoft, he's shaping the future of responsible AI at scale. At Facebook, he led the news feed ranking team. At Twitter and Pinterest, he built large-scale data platforms powering personalization and discovery. Welcome, Krishna.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
So maybe you could start by just telling us a little bit about your background. How did you come to set up Fiddler AI?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm an engineer by background. I came to the States in 2001, for my grad school. After that, worked in Bing Search at Microsoft. This was a small team trying to build a web search engine at scale, and I was working on the search quality. And that's where I got exposed to machine learning, and we were building these two-layer neural networks for search ranking that you could train on a desktop and deploy to production. Yeah. After that, I spent time in social media companies like Twitter, Pinterest, and Facebook. A lot of my responsibilities were on building data infrastructure for analytics, real-time analytics of streaming data, and then, machine learning infrastructure. So especially at Facebook, I was working on explainability and model observability tools for newsfeed ranking. This was quite important for the company at the time to increase transparency around newsfeed. Specifically built products like Why Am I Seeing This Story in the newsfeed, which basically exposed human readable insights into the inner workings of the algorithm. And that's kind of what motivated me to start Fiddler, because the hypothesis we had was AI is going to be a first-class citizen in the enterprise stack, and there'll be a new set of tools required to develop, deploy, and monitor it. And we wanted to be the platform that people could use to monitor and observe and understand AI. Because at the end of the day, the mission of the company is to build trust in AI. Yeah. And the only way to do it is to be able to know how it's working behind the scenes. And that's what Fiddler is unlocking for our customers today.
Yeah, that sounds like a very good, worthwhile cause. So I understand that agents are a very big part of your business. There's a lot of discussion around them in the industry and a lot of different kind of description about what they actually are. Could you just tell us, how do you define an AI agent?
Absolutely. I think an agent, like what its name is, it has agency to do things, right? So we have seen the evolution of AI from classical machine learning to large language models now to agentic workflows. So if you've seen the classical machine learning models, they would get trained on, let's say your historical data sets, and try to predict the future. So you may have a fraud detection model that is trained upon the past transactions that were legitimate and fraudulent, and now it knows how to predict the potential future transaction with some level of accuracy. Yeah. Now, then came large language models a few years ago, which basically processed all the unstructured data, all the content on the web, and help you, provide you the ability to generate content. So it could be generating, essays, basically summaries of given blobs of text, even generating images, and we are seeing generation of videos and audios as well. Agents take this even more further, right? Agentic workflows take all of these models and combine with your, software logic to implement certain tasks. So you could essentially build an agentic workflow to automate your claims processing. Instead of having a rule-based system that you coded in the past, you could have a model-based system, which is an agentic workflow that is, automating this task, right? You can have an agentic workflow that, creates a credit risk report. You can have an agentic workflow that essentially automates customer service, provides intelligent answers to your customer support folks, to where it queries all of your structured data of previous customer interactions and can tell you, how the customer is doing, whether they're going to churn in the next few months, what can you do? So these are more action oriented. That's basically how we define, agents, and there's a lot of different ways that you're building agents now, from single agent to multiple agents as well.
So given kind of your role at Fiddler AI is a kind of responsible, like implementing responsible AI, why were agents a good fit for your particular offering?
Because look, I mean, this morning I was reading an article by Jensen Huang, right? And there's this big debate on, who needs to implement safe and responsible AI, why AI safety is important. And also New York State passed a AI regulation as well this morning. So I think at the end of the day, AI is growing at a rapid pace. As in the models are becoming more and more complex over the time. They're able to do increasingly interesting and complex tasks. But this is all a black box for a human. How is it working behind the scenes? When would it generate incorrect answers or take incorrect actions? And especially if these systems are running in high stakes, situations like, now we are seeing AI being implemented for clinical diagnosis, drug discovery, insurance use cases, banking use cases, HR use cases, where there's an outcome that could affect a human in a good way or potentially an adverse way, right? Yeah. So it's very important for us to build transparency and trust into these systems so that you can confidently deploy them. It's almost like it's an accountability that we need to take to do this. The other part of it is responsible AI, or being able to invest in these best practices of AI building, help you a better form of AI as well. At the end of the day, it's all comes down to like dollars, right? Large companies are investing hundreds of millions of dollars in buying massive infrastructure like GPU farms and training these models, or even buying foundation model licenses. And all of this will come to fruition if those applications work the way as you expect. If there is no ROI, then what's the point of it? So that's our slogan is responsible AI. We call it RAI, is ROI. So if you do it, then it's actually not just good for society, good for your customers. It's actually good for the company, good for the enterprise, so that you're deploying high quality AI applications to your end users.
And so you must speak a lot to customers about agentifying their business and agents and how they work. Like, what are you hearing? Some of the bottlenecks that they're coming to you with, like when they're thinking about applying agents.
Yeah, look, I think there are basically two kinds of use cases that we see when customers think about agentifying their business processes. One is there is a bunch of legacy software that already exists. We are working with a fintech analytics company that produces, financial analytics solutions for their banking customers, and they've been in business for a number of years. They have 30 different products today in the market, and they sell to banks and a lot of fintechs and credit unions. Now they're trying to take their solutions, which they're selling to these financial analysts, and layering on a generative AI or agentic layer on top of it. And so this is basically what you're saying is you're taking your existing software and putting an agentic skin on top of it so that it's much more accessible. So instead of having one use case they mentioned to me is like a deposit analytics solution that usually mostly financial analysts get to use it. But putting an agentic skin on top of it, now they can democratize its access to more people in the organization. Including from a CFO to non-technical folks can also glean insights from it. So it just increases the utility of that product, increases the value of the product to their organization, right?
Yeah.
So that's one use case. The second use case is a lot of new things are being built. People are reimagining business processes, rewriting them completely with agentic AI in mind. So it's now instead of putting a skin, you're actually completely refactoring that business process to be an agentic workflow. So one use case we've heard is most people are building these renewal AI assistants or assistants that inform customer support teams about how their end customers are doing. Many SaaS companies have this problem. They have to understand how their customers are doing at any given point. And usually most of this activity has been done by legacy CRM tools that use more rule-based or statistical-based metrics to understand churn of customers and whatnot. But with generative AI and agentic workflows, you could build assistants that can give humans, like customer support folks, a natural language interface to ask questions. Hey, let's say imagine like JP Morgan is my customer. I can ask like, hey, how is JP Morgan doing?
Right.
What was their last few interactions with our team? Are they happy? Are they going to churn in the next month? What is the likelihood? So these are all like human level interactions that empower your support agents to like with a lot more insights. So these are the use cases. Now, the challenge behind implementing these things is how are you going to make sure that the agents are performing the right actions, that because they're all doing, the outcomes are all determined by the models, right? Whether the large language models or classical machine learning, and model outcomes are not necessarily 100% accurate. So how do you know when they might be doing or taking a wrong action, or they are providing a bad guidance or incorrect guidance, right? So being able to detect accuracy and responses and how their actions are, their performing actions, is a big problem. The other problem is, how do you know if like the workflow is processing this properly? If there are intermittent failures, why that might be failing, if a database lookup is failing, or if a wrong context is passed down the chain of the agentic workflow, how do you know that? So being able to instrument the entire workflow, being able to observe it and monitor it becomes very important at that point. Otherwise, what happens is a lot of this work stays in prototype mode. And this is one of the problems that today with AI agents or even in generative AI is a lot of the stuff gets stalled in prototyping mode. And in order to launch to production to get that ROI, you need the ability to evaluate them, you need the ability to monitor them, you need the ability to set up controls and guardrails around them so that that they're doing their job accurately and for your users.
Well, so let's say I'm a bank and I want to identify my customer service regime. Like, where do I start?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? So look, I mean, a lot of banks have chatbots that are their old school chatbots that are mostly rule based or decision tree based systems that they know, okay, if you ask this a question, it gets routed in a particular manner based on the decision tree logic, and there are some factoids that are baked in place that are retrieved as answers for those questions, right? These systems fail for if you ask slightly different question, if you or some latest event that has happened. So they are not frequently updated, these databases, and they cannot answer like these fuzzy questions in a relevant manner. So it's a great opportunity to put a Gen AI skin on it, where you can still use your rule-based system, you can still control the answers that you want to provide, but you can expand, you can actually provide like a more of a natural language interface for your customer so that it feels like interacting with a human, and you can actually ask the same question differently and the chatbot still understands it and can still process it and give you the relevant answer, right? And similarly, that's one way to like apply a skin. The other way is like, look, I mean, you can completely rewrite this conversational assistant using a Gen AI application. You can say, okay, now we're going to modernize this completely. We'll take all of our data, put it into some vector database. We will create, use some, foundation model to summarize these answers. We will create like a, generative Gen AI application that can, take these things almost like like a chat GPT style application on top of it. Yeah. So these are two choices that are present. You can go either way. It depends on what is the ROI that you're looking for. What is the sort of the what is the bang for the buck?
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, staying with the kind of the bank scenario, obviously we have regulated and non-regulated industries, banking being regulated. Like where and how do I, as a bank, apply responsible AI?
Yeah. Look, I think at the end of the day, responsible AI is set of best practices, right? It's essentially ability to control and test and monitor how your AI systems are being developed, deployed, and shipped and production. So it's much more of a process that you need to implement, and tools like Fiddler help you enable that processes. For example, let's take this hypothetical case, right? A bank is trying to create a customer service chatbot, and it wants to modernize their call center or like just like customer experience. And they can start with this sort of stack where, where is all our unstructured data, all the previously answered questions, how do we make them available for retrieval? This is where all the vector database come in, and what are the language models that we can use, for our use case to summarize these answers effectively, and how do we test this, and this is where evaluation comes in. So evaluation is very important for, agentic workflows and Gen AI workflows, because you need to know if the answers are accurate. It'll help you and also being able to know if someone can hack into your chatbot and ask malicious questions. There are these prompt injection attacks that could happen where they can retrieve sensitive user information externally. So how effective are your controls in place to block those things? And then monitor when you deploy this application to production, being able to monitor for these things.
So tell me a bit more about Fiddler and how you prevent some of these problems.
Absolutely. So Fiddler is an AI observability platform. Mm-hmm. So we attach ourselves to your AI workflow. We are agnostic to what a foundation model provider you would use, whether it's open source or a cloud-based foundation model provider, and what programming framework you would use, like to orchestrate these agents. There are many open source or programming frameworks like LangChain, Crew AI, and others. We can basically attach ourselves and consume the exhaust of your agentic workflows or Gen AI applications. So by exhaust, what I mean is the log of prompts, responses, metadata. It could be other events that are produced in an agentic workflow that go into our system, and then we then give you insights into how the app is performing. So if it's like a standard RAG application, like a generative application, you would see a scorecard of this is basically how many times your app was hallucinating, or this was the safety scores on your application. This is how this is the PII frequency on your application, or this is the cybersecurity report on it, right? So you have all these comprehensive metrics. You can also bring in your business data, KPI data, for example, how many times are users satisfied with the answers, and sort of combine it with this matrix to come up with okay, what is my ROI? What is the cost for running this application in production? And am I seeing ROI for it? So you can measure all of those things. You can measure the model metrics, you can measure the K business metrics and whatnot. And now if you move to agents now, so agents have system failures as well, tool calls that go wrong, database retrievals that go wrong, memory issues. So we measure system issues as well with agentic workflows, and we then we instrument the entire agentic workflow, not just the end-to-end part of it, but the internal constituents, and provide you tracing capabilities, so you could visualize the agentic workflow, the hierarchy of it, how a session in an agentic workflow is flowing, which subtasks are failing, and why they might be failing. And so it helps you do root cause analysis as a developer and identify issues. So you'll have a comprehensive observability with root cause analysis, report generation. So as a developer, you know what's going on with your AI application. You can debug it. You can get alerts when things go wrong. And at the same time, you can create reports to communicate the success and the wins to the broader organization, and sort of track it on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's very cool. Are you using multi-agent systems at all, or are you using singles?
A lot of the customers today, most of our customers, we were tracking some numbers, like almost 70% of the use cases are still single agent workflows. A lot of the multi-agent stuff is still kind of being developed. There are a lot of different opinions on how to create these multi-agent architectures. For example, how much parallelism do you want to introduce into agents? When you're sort of distilling your task into constituent subtasks, how much linear you want to go. I think there are a lot of these interesting points of views we are seeing in the industry that is emerging. So I would say it's still in the infancy. But what makes this whole system important, the observability system that we're launching, actually we just launched our agentic observability product at the Databricks Summit this week, is that it's much more suitable for the multi-agent workflows, because that's where the complexity increases, right? Because the failures can happen in intermediate stages, and you don't know why things have failed, and being able to track that down is going to be important.
Yeah, presumably there's a bit of redundancy built in as well with multi-agent systems. If one agent fails, another one can pick up where the other one left off. So, I mean, just kind of staying with the multi-agent system analogy for a little while, as these systems grow bigger and bigger, as you scale to like hundreds of agents, like how do you scale the responsible AI with it?
Absolutely. This is where observability becomes so important, right? I remember I was an engineer at Twitter way back in the early 2010. So for those of you in the audience who are old enough, they would probably remember the fail whale. The fail whale would happen when Twitter had peak traffic. Usually a celebrity tweets or some big event happens in the world, and Twitter erupts. And then at the time, our infrastructure we were still scaling our infrastructure, and we would show like a whale being carried by the birds, which means the site is down and the engineers are working on it. And it's just a nightmare for us whenever that happens, right? And so the problem there was you had a lot of these microservices behind the scenes that would run to sort of all the way from constructing the tweet timeline that you need to see, extracting the data from databases, authorizing the user when they log in. All of this is sort of, you can describe it as an agentic workflow, but in the software construct. So there's a directed acyclic graph of tasks running, all these at runtime, and you want to execute this, under hundreds of milliseconds, right? Because for better user satisfaction. Now, any of those tasks failing would mean that you are not going to be reliable for the user. So you needed to monitor all of those things. You needed to know if one database is getting overloaded, or if the cache miss rate is increasing, or if suddenly some attack is happening on your DNS and whatnot. So the same things apply for agents, but in a different manner. Here, the workflow is orchestrated in almost like a rule-based system, right? You have deterministic code logic that is saying, if you see this, route this request to this particular service, or if you see a cache miss, do this, right? Here, the logic is model directed, so that is the whole point. So so you're moving from this deterministic software application to like a non-deterministic software application, from code-based largely to largely model-based guidance. And that's where new kind of observability is needed. Okay. And so as the agents, as you said, to hundreds of sub-agents, the problem will only grow for teams to be able to know what's going on within the workflow and diagnose those failures.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about the trust layer. Yeah. Like what does that look like, and how is that different from traditional MLs? Yeah.
So I have a philosophical take on this thing. One of my favorite books on this topic is the book called Sapiens, where it's one of those, I'm sure like a lot of audience must have read it. There's actually a very nice chapter on it which talks about why humans as a species have been successful, and the author talks about two things that separated humans from other animals. Like successful meaning we've now like occupy the most of the planet, and we've done a lot of imaginative things and improved our lives. I think two things was, one is our ability to build and scale trust. So one example the author cites is you can put like 100,000 chimpanzees in a stadium and there'll be a fight, but you can forget about 100,000. You can have 1,000 chimpanzees and there'll be a fight, right? But you can have 100,000 fans go to a football game and come back without any problem. Or you can have hundreds of millions of people governed by a single president or a prime minister, right? So humans have this ability to build trust in levels of abstraction. I think that is what manifests itself when in AI as well, right? So largely in the past centuries, we have been used to working with the other human and being able to know whether we trust that individual or not, or with a process, with an institution, right? But now as AI is taking over the decision making, now instead of a human underwriter, an AI-based assistant might be underwriting your loans, or maybe like in the future, maybe AI will, help interview candidates, or it will provide medical advice, or clinical diagnosis, or like already AI-based call centers might be giving you customer support advice. How do you trust that? How do you know it's working? Now, from a tactical perspective, for us, trust meaning that if you can measure it, then you can understand it, right? If you cannot measure it, then you really don't know, you can't really quantify, whether you believe it or not. So we actually believe in, monitoring a lot of facets of, AI, whether it's relevancy of outputs, accuracy, bias, how, whether there's toxicity, security, all of these aspects that could go wrong with AI, by measuring them, accurately, AI teams can build trustworthy AI and deploy and to their end users.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I wonder if you can point to like a couple of examples, like maybe with existing clients or in your past, career, like where businesses have been successful in this and applying trust.
One of our largest clients is U.S. Navy and Department of Defense, right? So they leverage Fiddler for understanding how their computer vision models work. Okay. So this is a public use case. We talk about there's a lot of computer vision data that they collect from underwater sea objects, and and they run computer vision models to detect what those are. Is it like a plane or a ship that sank years ago, or is it an underwater threat? But these computer vision models are not 100% accurate. So you need to monitor them. If you can have accuracy issues because the sensors that are collecting the images may have problems, right, and they may be sending blurry images, or you may have a situation where the model itself is misclassifying, hypothetically like a plane to be a ship. So Fiddler's explainability and monitoring products help you as a developer to understand it. If there is like a model drift happening, if like it could be happening because of bad sensor data, it could be that the model has become stale and it's underperforming, you can get an alert and detect it. Or if it's a model like misclassifying, you can pinpoint why that is happening. On the Gen AI side, we work with one of the largest travel marketplaces in San Francisco. They have built a customer support assistant to provide, guidance on how for their support people can resolve conflicts. So they have like the provider and the requester. It's a travel marketplace, and they want to know who's at fault, because they are kind of in the intermediary stage, and being able to know and do this accurately is very important, right? You don't want to have a summary that is incorrect here. You want to have a Gen AI assistant that's looking at all the arguments that are happening in that message window and being able to summarize them accurately. And that's where Fiddler helps in providing scores, real-time scores, that look, this summary is 90% accurate, or we call it faithful to the source data, or it seems like only 60% faithful. So that means that the human looking at it can go and personally look at it and see what's going on, and this feedback can go to the developer team to go and improve why the output might be producing some sort of hallucination there.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think, as we start to see more of these, human in the loop is becoming more and more important, right, as the industry develops. What about like standards and certifications for agent-based systems? Do you think there's a role for those as we become more and more advanced with these systems?
Absolutely. I think we've seen certifications like SOC 2 compliance that have become very important for third-party software today, and even like we are a software vendor at the end of the day. When we work with our customers, they do ask for SOC 2 compliance, HIPAA compliance, and other compliance certificates and which we need to make sure that we are constantly adhering to. And I see a world where as software becomes largely agentic, AI-based software, there will be a new kind of certification that are needed that might tell you, give me a scorecard of what you did with it. How did you build your agentic app? How did you test it? What were your evaluation metrics like? Already we see this happening in some regulated industry, like say banks, which have existing model risk management guidelines. So I think it only would just become a norm in the future when all software becomes AI-based software. Then you have to have a new set of certificates that you need to provide to the end customer to build confidence that you've done the due diligence in terms of making sure that your AI is working properly.
Do you see those standards being driven at the government level or the vendor level or both? Or?
I think the best way is to is the community to come up with those things. I think government is usually a laggard in these cases. Sometimes if the government acts too quickly, it might actually also hinder innovation. But there are some, for example, if you look at Europe, they've taken the stance of implementing this EU AI Act, right? So I think my opinion is like, sort of given like the situation where we are with international competition around AI and the need for the US to continue to be the leader in AI, which I think is very important for the world. I think it's going to be important to have like some sort of a community-based approach to start with, because it's also important to figure out what are the standards you want to set, right? Like what does it mean to get like an agent certification here? Is it like sort of standard around the processes or the actual outcomes? What do you want to set standards on? And then kind of take it to eventually sort of mandated by some sort of regulation eventually.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess looking ahead, what excites you, or I guess worries you about this growth and autonomy of complexity of AI agents that we're kind of moving it towards now?
I mean, the exciting part of it is the possibilities, right? Exciting part of it is the amount of grunt work that is going to get automated. I see it in my own experience of using these tools on a day-to-day basis, I use a lot of these tools as, in many different ways, right? From improving my writing to just like brainstorming to, just like, getting new ideas. And I think it's already wonderful. And I see the world where a lot of these menial tasks getting automated, intelligent automations coming in, and it's going to free up human time to focus on other more important and interesting activities. I think that's going to be a massive thing for humans in general, right? So from reduction of the grunt work and automation of these things.
What about
I think what about
vibe coding?
The vibe coding. I mean, I think that's very interesting. I mean, the software engineer in me, I learned like code by in the 90s writing down on paper, because we actually in India, growing up in India, computer access was very limited, so you had to take turns. So you had to first like write down accurate code, and you would sort of like then get a chance to like type it into the computer and like and see how it works, right? So you had to literally write code. There's no like assistant that's actually gonna write it for you. Yeah. And then you've seen a period where all the developers became code assemblers, and in some ways like no one wrote code but sort of like assembled code from various different places, existing code or like Stack Overflow and whatnot. Yeah. And now you're seeing AI do it for you. Yeah. I think the human element is still very important there, right? Because I think you won't take away the ability to debug and understand the code. Because even in when I used to work at these companies, like the most the most experienced or the strongest engineer was not someone who would write a lot of code, but someone who can debug complex code and review other people's code, right? Like I think that is still, to me, largely a human in the loop exercise. I mean,
Right.
so I think I'm a fan. I think it's great that AI is helping, with vibe coding and whatnot. I mean, just coming back to your original question, of course, like downsides of it. The downsides of it we just talked about. If you don't take care of some of these principles that we talked about, transparency, auditability, and being able to know what's going on within AI, observability, you could build AI systems that could be bad for, society at large, as well as, just even immediate business outcomes. And that's my worry too, like, in terms of like how much of this emphasis is being put on these, and so that's why we try to marry the ROI with best practices, and that is actually a true thing, because doing the right thing, it will eventually provide the right ROI for you if you're implementing AI. So that's, I think that is one concern that we have.
Yeah, it's a good concern. Okay, well, I mean, like, if you in 5 years' time, and you're imagining a kind of a fully agentic world that we live in, what do you think are the biggest changes on how businesses? What do you think the biggest changes you will see around how businesses operate today?
I think I see a world in 5 years where a lot of the software that we see today is transformed to be AI based or agentic, or whatever you want to call the term of the day at the time. AI based software, right? And I think that is very clear to me, given the rate at which the models are improving, and the enthusiasm of the community in building and shipping, and already some early results of companies claiming massive efficiency gains that they are seeing from deploying these systems. I think we are entering that stage for sure. And I think the way to we want to ensure that people are building those systems the right way, so that they get those outcomes and better outcomes faster.
Do you see like kind of a web of agents and like B2B agents talking to B2C agents and vice versa?
Yeah, I mean, you already see introduction of MCP, the model context protocols that are trying to enable, almost trying to become like an HTTP of between agents, right? So where, imagine that example that I talked about, where you have a travel agent that has to make a flight reservation, make a Airbnb reservation, make a whatever, a cab, a sort of a rental car reservation. So imagine a situation where it might be calling an Expedia agent and an Airbnb agent, and or maybe some sort of a sixth rental car company agent, and it's all combining all of those results into a schedule and giving you the final result, right? And I don't think it's pretty near, actually. It's probably going to happen in the next year or a couple of years.
That's closer than I thought. So finally, just what's one takeaway? And I asked this of all the interviewers that we've been having on the show, but like, what's one takeaway for enterprise leaders that you would leave them with when thinking about applying agents? What should they be thinking or doing differently?
I think one of my biggest realizations in the last couple of months is this notion of compound AI stack, right? Okay. I think enterprises, we largely work with enterprises, and the best way to get ROI from agentic AI is think about how can you improve your existing software using agentic AI, and that's where this this notion of the compound AI stack. So you may have existing machine learning models, existing data assets, existing software systems. How can you bring them into the fold of Gen AI and increase the utility of those tools, increase the utility of those applications? And to me, this is where the biggest ROI is there for enterprise. How can you modernize your credit risk application? You may have credit scoring models that have been built over years, like statistical models. How can you modernize your KYC and anti-money laundering workflows? How can you modernize your customer support workflows? I think how can you modernize your business intelligence workflows? So you can think about building an agentic skin on your existing software. And I think we are seeing that happen with a few of our enterprise customers, and they're seeing good ROI. And I think we call it the compound AI effect,
right.
Where you take what you have and layer on this agentic skin and start, seeing some very quick ROIs, versus like, there are other problems with an enterprise, right? Is like, doing something new is disrupting something internally that's working well. It's sort of a long process. We believe that this could be a very quick way to bring an AI into the fold and educate your organization the impact of it, while it's sort of still not losing like the full ROI of it. You can extract a good amount of ROI with this type of compound AI effect.
And when you talk about that skin, like, can you be a bit more specific? Like, what is that skin?
So think about it this way, right? So you have let's talk about KYC, right? So you have an existing KYC application that is probably running with some, let's say some rule-based system, some machine learning-based systems. So you have some structured data, some right. Now, let's say if you want to automate this using an agentic workflow, instead of completely rewriting it, you can put like an agentic workflow on existing system, right? And in fact, agentic workflows lend itself that way, where you can write a programmatic orchestration that can call your existing database. It can call your existing predictive models. It can bring those results back into the system. And then it can automate that, know your customer workflow for you in a manner and improves the efficiency and reliability and, and maybe potentially reduces the amount of humans that need to review all of that, right? So that's basically what I talk about. Okay. So where you completely don't get rid of what you have, right? And that is a hard challenge for enterprises, right? Like, every new wave comes in and people, oh God, like we just went from like, data center to cloud transformation, and we just did our modern data stack. Oh, now you're telling me to go and do something else. And so what compound AI talks about is you take advantage of all the things that you've done so far, your cloud movement to cloud, your movement to data, and layer on AI on your data assets, on your existing software assets, and extract that ROI.
So these agents could use like coded tools to tap into the APIs, existing CRM solutions.
And agentic workflows lend itself that way, right? Because you're mixing those tool calls and database calls with LLM calls, and you're trying to create this intelligent automation.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. Well, thank you very much for joining us on the Agent Effect podcast. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Krishna, and I wish you all the best with Fiddler.
Absolutely. It was lovely to talk to you, and thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you.